She lived in a small house at the edge of town where the paint was peeling and the windows were always shut tight. The air inside was heavy and quiet most of the time, except for the shouts that sometimes came from the adults in the house. She was very small for her age and had learned early to make herself as invisible as possible. She moved quietly from one room to another, never staying too long in one place, always listening for sounds that told her trouble was coming. She knew the footsteps that meant danger and the ones that meant someone was leaving. She had learned to hide under the table or in the small closet where the door did not shut properly, but gave enough cover to make her feel safe for a little while. She did not have many friends. School was something she went to because it was required, and because it was one of the few places she could be outside the house. Even at school, she kept to herself. She watched other children laugh and play together, and sometimes she felt a small sting in her chest, because she wanted that too, but did not know how to ask for it. Her clothes were always a little too old or patched, and sometimes her shoes had holes in them. Other children noticed, and some would tease her, but she had learned to ignore it and keep her head down. Inside the house, things were different. The adults were often angry and did not notice her unless she made a mistake or tried to speak. She learned early to stay silent and to not call attention to herself. The smallest misstep could bring yelling or worse. She learned what words to avoid and which ones made the anger rise faster. She became very good at reading faces and listening to voices to guess what would happen next. Some days she would sit on the floor in her room with her knees pulled to her chest and just breathe slowly to try to make the world seem less loud. Even with all the fear she carried every day, she found small things to hold on to. There was a little kitten that sometimes wandered into their yard and she would leave food out for it. When the kitten came close, she could feel a little warmth in her chest because it did not judge her and it did not yell. She also liked to draw in a small notebook she kept hidden under her bed. She drew pictures of things she wanted to see one day. She drew open fields, animals running, and people smiling together. Drawing made her feel like she could go somewhere else, even if just for a few minutes. Sleep was not easy. The nights were the hardest. She would lie in bed listening to the creaks and groans of the house and wondering if anyone would notice if she never woke up. Sometimes she cried quietly into her pillow because the pain inside her felt too big to hold alone. Other times she stayed very still and imagined that she was far away from the house, a place where the sun always shone and no one ever hurt her. She held on to those small images like little candles in a dark room. One day at school, she noticed a teacher watching her differently than the others. The teacher asked her to stay after class and spoke gently, asking her about her homework and how she was feeling. She wanted to lie and say everything was fine, but the teacher's eyes were soft and patient. And somehow she felt safe enough to say a little. She spoke about being tired and how she sometimes stayed home alone. The teacher listened carefully and wrote some notes quietly. That night, she could not stop thinking about the teacher and how someone had actually cared enough to ask about her. The days passed slowly. Some days were quiet and she could move through them without too much fear. Other days were filled with yelling and anger, and she had to run and hide to keep herself safe. She started to notice small changes in herself. She felt stronger when she could escape without being caught. She felt proud when she could feed the kitten or draw a picture without being disturbed. Those little victories gave her hope that maybe one day things could be different. She also began to imagine a life outside the small house. She imagined a place with wide open fields and animals she could run with. She imagined a home where people spoke kindly and where laughter was not something to fear. She imagined a person who could take her hand and tell her that she was safe now. Those thoughts were dangerous sometimes because they made the reality in the house feel even heavier. But she could not stop them. They were like seeds planted deep in her heart. One afternoon, the yelling was louder than usual. She had been trying to finish a small drawing of a field with horses when the sound of a door slamming made her heart jump. She clutched her notebook and hid under the table. The adults shouted at each other, and she could hear footsteps moving closer to her hiding place. She stayed very still, barely breathing, and prayed that they would not find her. After what felt like hours, the noise finally faded and she crept out slowly. She held her notebook to her chest and promised herself that she would find a way out someday, The next morning, she noticed a flyer on the school bulletin board about foster care and children who needed safe homes. She did not know exactly what it meant, but she felt a strange pull in her chest. The words made her think that maybe there was a place where she could be safe, where she could belong. She looked at the pictures of children smiling in families and felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. Later that week, the teacher came to her again. The teacher's face was kind, and she asked more questions about her home. This time she told the teacher a little more, enough to let the teacher know that she needed help. The teacher promised to do something and reassured her that she would not be alone. That night, she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. She did not know exactly what was coming, but she knew that something was about to change. The following days were a blur. Social workers came to the house and asked questions. They took her aside and spoke gently, explaining that they wanted to make sure she was safe. She felt nervous, but she also felt a flicker of excitement. The thought that she might leave the house forever made her heart race. She packed a small bag with the few things she could carry, including her notebook and a small blanket she had slept with every night. She held them close and promised herself that she would not let go of hope. When the day came to leave, she looked around the house one last time. She did not feel sadness for the walls or the furniture. She felt relief that she would not have to hide under the table anymore. She walked out carefully, keeping her bag close, and held her head high even though her hands shook. She did not know what the future would bring, but for the first time in her life, she believed that maybe she could be happy again. As the car drove away from the small house, she watched the windows and the yard disappear behind her. The sun shone softly through the glass, and she felt warmth on her face. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly, trying to memorize the feeling of the air against her skin. She felt like she was stepping into a new world where she could finally be herself. Without fear, the journey to the new place was quiet. The car moved steadily along the roads, and she held her bag tightly. She looked out the window at the fields and trees passing by. She imagined what it would be like to live somewhere where people cared for her and where she could laugh freely. She felt the smallest smile touch her lips for the first time in a long time. When they arrived at the foster home, she would stay in temporarily. She felt nervous. The house was not like her old one. It had bright walls and open windows and smelled faintly of food. A woman greeted her warmly and showed her to her room. The room was small but cozy and had a bed with soft blankets and a shelf for her things. She set her bag down carefully and looked around. For the first time, she felt that this could be a safe place. Even if only for a little while, she spent the first night quietly in the bed, listening to new sounds. The air felt different, lighter somehow, and she took deep breaths. She felt strange feelings she had not allowed herself before. She felt safe, and she felt hope, and she felt the possibility of being loved. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in many nights she slept without fear. The days after leaving her old home felt strange and new. Everything was unfamiliar, from the bright walls of the foster home to the smell of fresh bread in the kitchen. She felt a little afraid of these new sounds and faces, but also something she had not felt in a long time: curiosity. She wanted to know what it would be like to live somewhere that did not make her feel small or invisible. The woman who ran the foster home was kind and patient. She showed her to her room and helped her unpack a few things. There was a bed with soft blankets and a small shelf where she could place her notebook and a few drawings. She liked the little space she was given. For the first time, she felt like a room could be hers in a way that no one could take away. She kept her bag close and felt the weight of her few belongings as a comfort. School continued as usual. But now she walked there from the foster home. The streets were quieter in this part of town, and she noticed things she had never paid attention to before. Birds sang in the trees, the wind moved softly through the branches, and sometimes children played games in the yards. She watched them from a distance and felt a small tug in her chest, longing to join them, but a fear of being laughed at or rejected. Her teacher noticed the change in her. She seemed quieter, but also more aware. Sometimes she smiled a little when she spoke, or when the teacher praised her drawing or reading. The teacher encouraged her and offered gentle words that made her feel brave. She began to trust adults a little more, though not completely. She had learned that trust was dangerous and fragile. But slowly, she let a few small threads slip through. Evenings at the foster home were different. Other children lived there too, and they shared meals at the big table. At first she did not talk much. She watched how the others laughed and joked and sometimes wished she could do the same. Slowly, she began to answer small questions and offer tiny smiles. The foster mother noticed these small changes and often praised her for them. It felt strange to hear someone say good things about her and not yell or get angry. One day the foster mother took her aside. She explained gently that she might be moving to a new home soon. It was a place with more space, and a man who lived on a ranch outside town. He was looking to adopt a child and wanted someone who needed a family. The girl did not know what to feel. A ranch sounded big and open, but it also sounded strange and different. She had never imagined leaving the town or living on a farm. The thought made her nervous and excited at the same time. She imagined wide fields and animals, and a house with many rooms. She imagined not being afraid to walk into any room or sleep at night. For the first time, she could see a place where she might belong. The foster mother promised that she would not have to go alone, and that someone would help her settle in. When the day came to leave, she packed carefully. She carried her notebook, her few clothes, and the small blanket that had been with her since she could remember. Each item felt like a link to her past, but also a comfort as she stepped into the unknown. The car ride was quiet. She watched the trees and fields passing by, trying to imagine what it would be like to live somewhere new. Her heart beat fast, and she held her bag tightly. Arriving at the ranch was like stepping into another world. The land stretched wide and open, with rolling fields and a few scattered trees. Horses grazed in the distance, and a wooden fence ran along the edge of the property. The house was simple, but sturdy, with a porch and windows that reflected the sun. She felt a mix of awe and fear. Everything was so big, and she was so small in comparison. A man greeted her at the door. He was tall and strong, with hands that looked used to hard work. His face was kind and serious at the same time. He spoke gently, asking her name, and if she was tired from the trip. She nodded quietly, unsure what to say. He showed her around the house slowly and carefully, explaining where she would sleep and where she could put her things. He did not rush her and did not ask too many questions at once. She was introduced to the animals next. Horses, cows, and a few chickens lived on the ranch. She had never been close to animals before, but something about their calm presence made her heart slow. The man encouraged her to feed a horse with his guidance. At first she hesitated, afraid to touch it. But the horse lowered its head gently, and she placed a small handful of feed in front of it. The horse nuzzled her hand softly. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a small spark of trust. Days passed slowly as she adjusted to life on the ranch. The man, who she thought of quietly as her guardian, did not pressure her to speak or act a certain way. He gave her space and safety. She learned the routines of the ranch, feeding animals, collecting eggs, and helping with small chores. The work was hard at times, but it gave her a sense of accomplishment. She felt useful and capable in ways she had never known before. Evenings were quiet. They would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the fields. Sometimes the man would speak about the land, the animals, or memories of his wife who had passed away. He never forced her to talk about her past, but she felt she could share small pieces if she wanted. Slowly, she began to tell him tiny stories about herself, her drawings, the little kitten she used to care for, and her favorite books. He listened carefully and never interrupted or judged. The nights were different too. For the first time in her life, she slept without the heavy fear pressing on her chest. She curled under the blankets and listened to the sounds of the ranch, the wind through the trees, the distant lowing of cows, the soft neigh of a horse. It was not silent, but it was peaceful. She began to dream of running through the fields, free and unafraid. One day, while walking through the pasture, she noticed a small bird struggling on the ground. She picked it up gently and showed it to the man. He smiled and encouraged her to make a small nest for it until it could fly again. She felt proud as the bird chirped softly in her hands. It reminded her of herself, a little fragile and hurt. But learning to survive with care and kindness, The man began to teach her about the animals and the land with patience. He showed her how to feed the horses, how to mend fences, and how to plant seeds in the garden. She learned quickly and was proud of her progress. Each day she felt a little stronger and braver. She started to speak more, ask questions, and even laugh quietly at the small jokes he made. The house no longer felt strange, and the land no longer felt too big. She began to feel like she belonged. She missed her old home sometimes, but those feelings were different now. They were memories, not chains. She could think about the small things she left behind without fear. She imagined the kitten and hoped it was safe. She thought about the old classroom and her teacher and felt grateful for the help that had brought her here. Slowly, she realized that people could care and that she could trust. Winter came, and with it, the cold wind sweeping across the fields. She learned to dress warmly and helped the man bring in firewood for the stove. The nights were long, but they felt safe. The man would sometimes read aloud to her by the fire or tell stories about the land. She would sit close, listening and feeling the warmth not just from the fire, but from his presence. School continued. Though it was harder to wake up early, she missed a few days, but the man encouraged her gently to keep going. He never scolded her for being late or tired. She felt supported in ways she had never known. She started to do her homework on the porch in the mornings with the animals nearby. Sometimes she drew pictures of the ranch, the animals, and the wide-open fields. She felt proud of her work and wanted to show it to the man. He praised her gently, and she felt seen. Slowly, a routine developed. Wake up, feed animals, do chores, attend school, return to the ranch. Help with more chores, eat dinner, sit by the fire, sleep. The rhythm was simple but steady, and it gave her comfort. She began to dream of a future where she could continue to grow, learn, and be safe. She began to imagine herself as someone who could make a difference in her own life. She still had moments of fear and sadness, but they were smaller now. She learned to hold on to hope, even when the nights were long or when she felt lonely. She knew she could trust the man and that the land was a safe place. Slowly, she began to understand what it meant to be part of a family, not just a house with walls, but people who cared and protected each other. The days blended into weeks, and she felt herself growing stronger and more confident. She laughed more and spoke more. She learned to care for the animals in the land and felt proud of her abilities. She began to imagine herself not as the small, scared child who had lived in fear, but as someone capable, loved, and protected. She began to believe that life could be different, that the future could hold happiness she had never dared to imagine. Life on the ranch had started to feel familiar to her, but there was still so much she did not know. The animals were friends she could touch and see, but the man who took care of the ranch remained a mystery in some ways. He was quiet most of the time, strong and steady, with a presence that was both comforting and serious. Sometimes she watched him move through the fields and thought about how someone could be so calm even when the work was hard. She wanted to understand him, but she did not know how to approach someone who had always lived alone and kept his feelings close to himself. One morning, she woke early and found him already in the barn. He was brushing the horses, moving slowly and carefully. She hesitated at the door, not wanting to interrupt, but he noticed her and nodded. She stepped inside quietly and held out the small bucket of oats she had carried from the house. He smiled faintly, a small warmth in his eyes, and took the bucket from her hands. They worked together, feeding the horses side by side without much talking. She liked the silence. It felt safe and steady, a rhythm she could follow. Over the next few days, he began to include her more in the chores around the ranch. He showed her how to mend fences, how to gather eggs without startling the chickens, and how to check on the cows in the fields. At first she struggled with the work. The fences were heavy, the eggs were fragile, and the cows were large and sometimes unpredictable. But he never got angry. He guided her patiently, correcting gently when she made a mistake. She felt a small spark of pride every time she did something right. Slowly, she began to feel that she could be useful, that she could belong here. He began to talk to her sometimes about small things. He would ask if she had slept well or if she wanted to help with a specific task. She answered quietly at first, unsure if her words mattered, but he listened carefully and never interrupted. She started to tell him small pieces of her past, little stories about her drawings, the kitten she had cared for, or books she liked. He never pressed her for more. He just listened, and that made her feel safer than she had in a long time. One afternoon, while they were walking along the edge of the pasture, he stopped and pointed out a small grove of trees. He told her that this was a good place to rest when the sun was hot and that the animals liked the shade too. She sat under a tree, watching the horses graze, and felt a strange calm she had never known. He sat nearby, not too close, giving her space, but still present. She realized she could breathe without fear for the first time in many years. Over the weeks, the small bond between them grew. She began to share more of her thoughts. She asked questions about the ranch, the animals, and sometimes about him. He answered patiently, telling her stories about the land, the animals he had cared for, and memories of his wife who had passed away. She listened quietly, feeling that she could trust him more with each story. She realized that he had a gentle heart and that he cared about her safety and happiness. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, they worked together to bring in the horses. She struggled with one of the younger horses that was nervous and fidgeted. She felt frustrated and scared that she might fail, but he stepped beside her and showed her how to guide it gently. The horse calmed under their combined care, and she felt a rush of pride. She looked at him, and he gave her a small smile that made her feel warm inside. For the first time, she felt that she could rely on someone, and that someone could rely on her. She began to look forward to mornings and evenings on the ranch. The work was hard, but it gave her a sense of purpose she had never known. She learned to care for the animals and the land, to notice small changes in the weather and the animals' behavior. Each day she grew stronger and more confident. The man continued to guide her without pressure, and she began to feel that she had a place in the world where she was safe and valued. One day she found a small, injured bird in the field. It had a broken wing and could not fly. She ran to the man, holding the bird carefully. He showed her how to make a small nest and care for it until it could fly again. She spent hours watching the bird, feeding it, and speaking softly. When the bird finally took flight, she felt a joy she had not known in a long time. It reminded her of herself, fragile and hurt at first, but capable of healing with care and patience. She started to open up more at school as well. The routine of the ranch had given her confidence. She answered questions in class, shared her drawings, and even smiled at other children. She still kept some distance, still carried the memory of fear from her old home, but she felt stronger and braver. She began to imagine a future where she could live without constant fear, where she could laugh and be herself. Winter came slowly to the ranch. The mornings were cold and frost covered the fields. She learned to dress warmly and help bring in firewood for the stove. The man showed her how to start a fire and keep it going, and they spent long evenings sitting by the warmth, talking quietly or watching the flames. She felt safe and calm in a way she had never felt before. She began to believe that this place could be her home, that this man could be her father. One morning, she woke to the sound of snow falling softly outside. The fields were covered in white, and the animals moved carefully through the frost. She bundled herself up and stepped outside to watch. The man joined her, and together they fed the horses and collected eggs. She laughed softly when one of the younger horses slipped in the snow, and he helped it regain balance. Laughter was new to her ears, and she realized that she could feel joy without fear. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between her and the man grew stronger. He began to trust her with more responsibilities on the ranch, and she proved capable each time. She learned to ride horses, mend fences, and care for the animals. Each task she completed made her feel proud and capable. She began to imagine herself as part of the ranch, part of a family, and part of a life that was safe and meaningful. She still had moments of doubt and fear, memories of her old home that would sometimes return in nightmares, but the man was always there, steady and patient, offering comfort and guidance without forcing her to speak. Slowly, she learned to face her fears, to believe that the past did not define her, and that she could build a future filled with love and care. One evening, after a long day of chores, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the fields. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was crisp and clear. She rested her head on her knees and felt a sense of peace she had never known. The man sat quietly beside her, not pressing, just present. She realized that she had found someone she could trust completely, someone who cared for her and would protect her no matter what. She began to speak more freely, telling him about her dreams, her hopes, and even small fears. He listened without judgment, offering gentle words of encouragement. She began to feel that she could be herself, that she could express her thoughts and feelings without fear. The connection between them grew, a quiet bond of trust and care that neither needed to rush. The animals continued to teach her patience and responsibility. She learned to care for them with gentleness and understanding. The routine of the ranch and the rhythm of chores, feeding, and watching over the animals. Each day she grew stronger, more confident, more capable of facing the world outside the ranch. Spring approached, and with it new life on the ranch. The fields became green again. Flowers bloomed and new animals were born. She helped care for the newborn animals, learning the delicate balance of nurturing and patience. She felt proud of her role and grateful for the trust the man placed in her. She began to see herself as part of a family, part of a life that was safe, steady, and filled with hope. She thought often about her old home, but those thoughts no longer filled her with fear. They were memories she carried gently, reminders of how far she had come. She began to dream of a future where she could continue to grow, learn, and love without fear. The man remained her guide, her protector, and slowly her father in every sense that mattered. She had begun to feel at home on the ranch, and each day brought a small sense of peace she had never known before. The animals were part of her life now, and she loved waking early to help feed them and care for them. The mornings were quiet and calm, filled with soft light and the gentle sounds of the land. She felt stronger with each passing day and began to notice how much she had changed. The man who had taken her in remained steady and patient, guiding her without rushing or forcing her to be someone she was not. He watched her closely, noticing the small victories and the little moments of courage that she did not always see herself. He showed her how to ride a horse more confidently, how to mend broken fences, and how to care for the animals with gentle hands. Each task taught her patience and responsibility, and she began to feel proud of herself in ways she never had before. She began to open her heart slowly. At first, she would only speak about small things, like how the sun felt on her face or the way the chickens pecked at the ground. But over time, she began to share stories from her past, small fragments that she felt safe telling. The man listened without interrupting, without judgment, giving her the sense that she could trust him completely. It was a new feeling for her, one that she had never experienced in her old life. The nights were filled with quiet moments. They would sit on the porch and watch the sun sink behind the hills, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. She liked these moments best, when the world was calm and she could feel the steady presence of someone who cared for her. The man would sometimes speak about the land, the animals, or memories of his wife, sharing stories that made the ranch feel alive and full of history. She listened carefully, feeling a connection not just to him but to the life they were building together. One day, now walking through the pasture, she noticed a small fawn tangled in a bush. Its legs were caught, and it struggled to free itself. She felt a rush of fear and concern and called for the man. Together they gently freed the fawn and carried it to a safe spot where it could rest. She watched it quietly, speaking softly, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Saving the fawn made her feel strong and capable, and she realized that she could care for others just as she had been cared for. School continued to be part of her life, but it was no longer a place of fear or isolation. She had gained confidence and began to speak more freely in class, answered questions, and even smiled at other children. Bond she had formed with the man on the ranch gave her courage. She began to see herself as someone who could belong and succeed. The teacher noticed her growth and praised her gently, making her feel proud of herself. The seasons changed, and with each one, she learned more about life on the ranch. Spring brought new growth and new animals, and she helped care for them with careful hands. Summer brought long days of hard work, feeding the animals and tending the garden. Autumn brought harvest and preparation for the colder months. She felt connected to the land and to the rhythm of life in a way she had never experienced before. Each day was a lesson, a chance to grow, a reminder that she was safe and loved. One evening, after a long day of chores, she and the man sat by the fire. She told him about a dream she had, a dream of running through the fields without fear, laughing freely, and feeling completely safe. He listened carefully and nodded, telling her that dreams could become real if she worked for them and believed in herself. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of hope she had never felt before. For the first time, she believed that happiness was possible. The bond between them continued to deepen. She began to call him father in her heart, even if she had not yet spoken the words aloud. She trusted him completely, relying on him for guidance and protection. He noticed the change in her, the way she carried herself with confidence and strength. He treated her with respect and care, showing her that love could be steady and reliable. She began to feel that she was part of a family, not just living in a house, but belonging to a life filled with love and stability. One morning, she discovered a small, injured rabbit near the barn. It had a hurt leg and could not move properly. She ran to the man for guidance. Together, they created a safe space for the rabbit to recover. She spent hours watching it, feeding it, and speaking softly. When the rabbit finally hopped away, she felt a joy and pride that warmed her heart. Each act of care she performed on the ranch reminded her that she could make a difference and that she mattered. As the months passed, she began to take on more responsibility. She learned to ride horses with confidence, to care for the animals, and to manage small tasks around the ranch. The man trusted her judgment and encouraged her to make decisions. She felt empowered, capable, and strong. The fear that had once dominated her life was replaced by a sense of purpose and pride. She began to see herself as someone who could face challenges and overcome them with patience and care. The nights remained peaceful, filled with quiet conversations and gentle moments. She shared her thoughts, dreams, and small fears with him, and he listened with patience. He offered guidance and comfort without forcing her to speak or act in a certain way. She began to understand what it meant to be loved and protected, and she allowed herself to feel those emotions fully. The safety of the ranch and the steady presence of the man created a space where she could heal from the wounds of her past. One afternoon, while tending to the garden, she noticed a bird struggling in the dirt. She gently helped it and brought it to the man, who guided her in caring for it until it could fly again. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride. A small act of care she performed reminded her that she could be trusted, that she could be strong, and that she could contribute to the life around her. She began to believe that she had value and that her presence mattered. School continued to challenge her, but she faced it with newfound confidence. She spoke up in class, shared her drawings, and participated in group activities. The skills and patience she had learned on the ranch gave her courage to engage with others. She began to feel that she could belong in more than one place, that she could navigate the world outside the ranch as well as the life she had built on it. The seasons shifted again, bringing the warmth of summer. She spent long days with the man, feeding animals, mending fences, and tending the garden. She laughed more freely, spoke with confidence, and felt the joy of accomplishment. The bond between them continued to strengthen, rooted in trust, care, and shared experiences. She began to feel that she had a home, a family, and a place in the world where she belonged. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, she sat beside him and reflected on the journey she had taken. She remembered the fear and loneliness of her old home, the uncertainty of the foster system, and the small steps she had taken toward trust. She realized how much she had grown, how much she had learned, and how much she had healed. The man beside her had become more than a guide. He had become her father, her protector, her friend. She began to imagine the future with hope and excitement. She dreamed of learning new things, caring for more animals, and exploring the land around the ranch. She felt confident that she could face challenges, that she could continue to grow, and that she could build a life filled with love and purpose. The fear that had once controlled her life was replaced by courage, hope, and a sense of belonging. The bond between them continued to grow stronger with each passing day. She trusted him completely, shared her thoughts and dreams, and relied on his guidance and care. He treated her with respect, patience, and love, showing her that family could be steady and reliable. She began to see herself as part of a life filled with stability, kindness, and hope, and she embraced the possibilities of the future with an open heart. As the days passed, she continued to heal, learn, and grow. The ranch became a sanctuary, a place of safety, love, and discovery. She developed confidence, patience, and a sense of responsibility. She learned to care for the animals and the land, to trust herself and others, and to believe in the possibility of happiness. The man who had welcomed her into his life became her father in every sense that mattered, and together they built a bond rooted in love, trust, shared experience. She began to understand what it meant to be part of a family. It was not just living under the same roof, it was trust, care, and shared responsibility. It was laughter, guidance, and quiet moments of connection. It was knowing that someone would be there for you, steady and reliable, through every challenge. She realized that she had found that family on the ranch, and it filled her heart with a joy she had never known. The mornings on the ranch had begun to feel like a quiet promise of safety and warmth. She woke early with the sun, listening to the soft sounds of the land waking up the birds singing, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the lowing of cows in the distance. Each sound reminded her that she was alive and safe, and that the day ahead was hers to face with courage. She had grown accustomed to the routine of the ranch, but each day still held surprises and small joys. The man who had taken her in was already awake when she rose. He moved with steady purpose through the barn, tending to the animals as he had every morning. She watched him for a moment before stepping forward to help. Together, they fed the horses and checked on the cows. She had learned so much since arriving, but she still felt proud each time she could do a task independently and see that it was done well. He noticed her efforts and smiled quietly, a small gesture that made her chest feel warm. One afternoon, she helped guide a horse to the pasture for the first time on her own. The horse was young and skittish, and she felt her heart race as it moved beneath her. She remembered the man's instructions, her hands steady and her voice calm. Slowly, she led the horse across the field. When they reached the fence safely, she looked back at the man, who gave her a nod of approval. She felt a rush of pride and a deep satisfaction she had never known before. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The days were filled with learning and discovery. She tended to the garden, planted seeds, and watched them grow. She cared for newborn animals and learned how to soothe the frightened or injured. She laughed when a playful calf nudged her, or when the chickens scattered across the yard. She began to understand the rhythm of life on the ranch, the patience it required, and the joy it could bring. The work was hard, but it brought her a sense of purpose and belonging that she had never experienced before. The man continued to guide her with quiet patience. He offered encouragement without pressure and listened carefully when she spoke. She began to share her thoughts and dreams more freely, telling him about the books she liked, the drawings she had made, and the small hopes she carried for the future. He never dismissed her words, never judged her, and never forced her to be someone she was not. She began to see him not just as a protector, but as a father figure, someone she could rely on completely. One day, while walking through the fields, she noticed a small, injured bird struggling to fly. She picked it up carefully and ran to the man, who guided her in creating a safe space for the bird to heal. She spent hours watching it, feeding it, and speaking softly. When the bird finally took flight, she felt a joy and pride that filled her chest. Each act of care she performed reminded her that she could make a difference and that her presence mattered. She began to see herself as capable and valuable. School remained part of her life, but it no longer felt intimidating or isolating. She had grown confident in her abilities and in herself. She spoke more in class, shared her work, and participated in group activities. She laughed with other children and even helped those who seemed shy or afraid. The strength she had gained on the ranch gave her courage to face challenges outside of it. She began to understand that the world could be a place of kindness and opportunity, not just fear and pain. Winter turned to spring, and the land came alive with new growth. She helped care for the newborn animals, learning how to feed and protect them. The garden bloomed with fresh vegetables and flowers, and she took pride in the work she had done. The man watched her carefully, proud of her growth, and she felt a deep sense of connection to him and to the life they were building together. She began to feel that she truly belonged on the ranch, not just as a guest, but as part of a family. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she sat on the porch with the man, watching the sky change colors. She spoke about her dreams for the future, of learning more, exploring more, and helping others in need. He listened quietly, offering encouragement and wisdom without pushing her in any direction. She realized that she could trust him completely, that his support was steady and reliable. She began to feel a sense of freedom and hope that she had never known before. The bond between them continued to deepen. She began to call him father in her heart, even if she had not yet spoken the words aloud. She trusted him completely, relying on his guidance and care, and he treated her with respect and patience. He taught her that love could be gentle and steady, not frightening or unpredictable. She began to believe that family could be safe and nurturing. She could have a life filled with love, laughter, and trust. One morning, she noticed a small, injured rabbit near the barn. She gently picked it up and brought it to the man. Together, they cared for it until it could hop away safely. She felt a deep satisfaction and pride in her efforts. Each small act of care reminded her that she could make a positive impact and that she had value in the world. She began to see herself as someone who could give and receive love freely. The seasons shifted again, bringing the warmth of summer. She spent long days tending to the garden, feeding animals, and learning new tasks around the ranch. She laughed more freely and spoke with confidence. The bond between her and the man grew stronger with each shared moment. She began to feel that she had found her home, a place where she could grow, heal, be loved without fear. She thought about her old home sometimes, but those memories no longer filled her with fear. They were shadows of the past, reminders of how far she had come. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. She had learned to trust, to care, and to love. She had discovered that life could be filled with hope, safety, and joy. One afternoon, while riding a horse across the fields, she felt the wind against her face and the sun on her back. She realized how much she had changed since arriving at the ranch. She no longer felt small or invisible. She was strong, capable, and full of life. She could face challenges and find solutions. She could care for others and be cared for in return. She could be happy. The man watched her with quiet pride, knowing how far she had come. He had witnessed her transformation from a scared, lonely child to a confident, capable young girl. He had helped guide her, support her, and give her the love she had been missing for so long. And in return, she had given him the joy of watching someone grow and heal, of seeing hope return where there had once been fear. Evenings on the ranch became a time of reflection and peace. They would sit on the porch, talking quietly or sitting in companionable silence. She would sometimes rest her head on her knees and think about the journey she had taken. She remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the pain, and she felt gratitude for the life she had now. She had been rescued from the darkness of her past and had found a life filled with light, love, and possibility. One night, as the stars filled the sky, she looked up and felt a sense of wonder. She thought about all the things she had learned, all the small victories, all the moments of kindness that had shaped her life. She realized that she had grown in ways she had never imagined. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to love. She had discovered that she could be safe and happy, that she could belong, and that she could build a life full of meaning and joy. The bond between her and the man had become unshakable. He had become her father, her protector, and her guide. She trusted him completely, knowing that he would always be there for her. He treated her with patience, kindness, and love, showing her that family could be steady and reliable. She began to see herself as part of a life filled with stability, safety, and hope. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch flourished with life. She tended to the garden, cared for the animals, and continued to learn new skills. Each day she grew stronger and more confident. She laughed more freely, spoke with confidence, and felt a deep sense of belonging. The land and the man had become her world, and she embraced it fully, knowing that she was safe and loved. One afternoon, while exploring a small grove near the edge of the fields, she found a place where the sunlight filtered through the trees in soft beams. She sat down and closed her eyes, feeling the warmth and peace of the moment. She thought about her journey, about the fear and loneliness she had left behind, and she felt a sense of triumph. She had survived, grown, and found a life filled with love. The man joined her quietly, sitting nearby without speaking. She leaned back and rested her head against the tree, feeling his steady presence beside her. In that moment, she realized that she had found what she had longed for all her life: a home, a family, and a person who loved her unconditionally. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and joy, knowing that she could finally be herself. Free from fear and full of hope, as the sun began to set, they walked back to the ranch together. She felt a quiet happiness, a sense of peace that filled her heart. She had been rescued from a life of pain and had found a life filled with love and possibility. She knew that challenges would still come, but she felt ready to face them, supported by the man who had become her father. She had found her place in the world, and it was a place of hope, safety, and joy. She looked around the ranch, at the fields, the animals, and the house that had become her home. She felt a deep sense of belonging and pride. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. She had learned to trust, to care, and to love. She had discovered that life could be filled with hope, safety, and happiness. And she knew with certainty that she had found a father in the cowboy who had opened his heart to her and given her a life she had never imagined possible.